First up today on the agenda, we have approval of the minutes. They were emailed out for February 2nd, 3rd, and 4th. Would entertain a motion on approval. Senator Dietrich.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would move approval.
Seconded by Senator Hawk. Any further discussion on the minutes? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Those opposed? Motion carries. Minutes are approved. We'll now turn our attention to the hearing on Senate Bill 95. Adam, I do not have a list of participants. I'm not going to be able to see folks when they raise their hands online, so you may have to help me out sometime if I miss someone. I know we have some people online listening, even committee members in the building. Could you give us a briefing?
Sure, Mr. Chairman. Senate Bill 95, there's a bill similar to this last year. What it does is it removes the exemption from having to record odometer readings when a vehicle is sold. The exemption currently exists for vehicles not having to complete the odometer certification on vehicles 10 years of age or older with a vehicle weight of more than 16,000 pounds. The bill would now make all vehicles exempt from the odometer certification if such vehicles are otherwise exempt from the rule pursuant to, or otherwise exempt from recording pursuant to federal law. And with that, I'd be happy to stand for any questions.
Any questions? Senator Hawk.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Adam, are there, in federal law, are there weight limits on that similar to what we had in statute?
Mr. Chairman, if you might, I may defer to the division. They're probably much more familiar with these provisions than I am. This is a bill they requested and could probably answer that more fully.
I'm happy to wait for that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Adam.
Senator Powell, do you have a question?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Adam, would this apply to all four vehicles going forward, electric vehicles also?
There is no distinction, so yes, it would apply as long as they are, meet the exemption pursuant to federal law.
Well, Mr. Chairman, you were in utilities yesterday and you heard the conversation. We may want these odometer readings eventually, so thank you.
Committee, further questions for Adam. Senator Dietrich.
Thank you. And being new to the committee, I just have to ask, why is this important? Can someone tell me that?
I am sure the proponents are going to be excited to tell us.
All right. Thank you.
Any further questions? Seeing none, we'll turn our attention to the first proponent, Leanne Phelps. Are you online?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Thank you, and good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the Senate Transportation Committee. Thank you for the opportunity to present this morning as a proponent on Senate Bill 95. This legislation is being requested by the Division of Vehicles to conform with changes to the federal odometer disclosure law that was passed in the fall of 2019 and was passed by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, amending 49 CFR Part 580 of the federal rules. That ruling changed the exemption on odometer disclosure requirements. Previous law required disclosure for vehicles that were up to 10 years old. This new rule will require disclosure for any vehicle beginning with model year 2011s and will require those vehicles and newer to be have odometer disclosure for up to 20 years rather than 10. The federal requirement became effective January 1, 2021, so we're seeking to make the Kansas law mirror that. You may recall that a similar bill was proposed last year and passed out of Senate 39-0 before the pandemic. To answer some of the questions the committee had, there are weight limits on the vehicles. It would not require odometer disclosure on heavy trucks and trailers, and It is important because it is a consumer protection issue. Actually, there's a lot of fraud that occurs when there's odometer rollbacks and the like. And so this was sought by the federal law because they were noticing that vehicles were being on the road longer, and it was they were noticing that as soon as the 10-year odometer would roll off, that those were the vehicles that most likely were involved in a fraudulent transfer of ownership. I'd be happy to stand for other questions. Thank you.
Any questions? Senator Hawk?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Could you explain a little, again, you said disclosure for 2011 and newer for up to 20 years. So those vehicles are 10 years old now.
Correct.
Does it mean it's gradually going back? So in 2022, the 2011 will count. 2023, 2011 will still count. So ultimately, up to 2032 or 31, we'd still have to disclose those 2011, but you'd not have to disclose 2010 or 9 or 8 or 7 or whatever. Is that what that means?
Yes, sir. It is somewhat of a rolling disclosure. So each of these, starting with model year 2011, those have to be disclosed for 20 years. And then next year, 2012 falls in that category, and it will continue on. We have vehicles, that now that are subject to the 10-year, but each year that progresses, it will extend out, and there'll be a new category of those that need the 20-year disclosure. So it's a little bit confusing, but yes.
And then on the heavy trucks, is the federal rule the 16,000 pounds, or is it, when you said heavy?
Right, and I don't have that right in front of me. It's either 16 or 20, and I just can't quite recall off the top of my head, but I could get that to you.
Thank you.
It did not change that weight.
Right, and I believe some of the heavy trucks have a longer reporting period already on the actual mileage. I may be incorrect on that, but that's what I believe. Senator Pyle.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm not trying to discredit your testimony, but when you say that there's all these cases and the federal cases and all this, is there any way you can get us that evidence? I'd like to see how many of them were prosecuted, if you have that. I mean, when you make those statements, you got to be able to back it up. How do we
Right.
verify and confirm that they were actually caught for rolling back odometers, prosecuted, and, charged? I think we ought to at least have a spreadsheet showing those numbers and backed up by some kind of evidence.
Okay. I do not have those level of details. What I could get you is the publication that they put in the Federal Register that indicated their testimony that that's the reason for the change in the law.
Any further questions? Seeing none, are there any other proponents wishing to testify on Senate Bill 95? Any opponents? Any neutrals? We'll close the hearing on Senate Bill 95 and turn our attention to the hearing on Senate Bill 99. Adam, can you give us a briefing?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, Senate Bill 99 is another bill that committee saw last year. What it would do is it would increase the current bonding requirement for used and new motor vehicle dealers from what currently exists in Kansas statute, which is $30,000, and it raises the bond amount to $50,000. So really the only change in the bill is the striking of $30,000 and the increase to $50,000. I should have mentioned the prior Bill 95 and Senate Bill 99, Senate Bill 95 did go into effect January 1, and Senate Bill 99 also goes into effect January 1 of 2022. So they won't go into effect. The bills won't go into effect the statute book. They'll go into effect, starting January 1 of the new year. Just wanted to point that out, just make sure everyone was on the same page. And with that, I'd be happy to stand for any questions.
Any questions for Adam? See none, thank you, Adam. We'll now turn to the proponents. Once again, Leanne Phelps.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can you still hear me?
Yes, we can.
Thank you. I'm Leanne Phelps. I am the Vehicle Services Manager for the Division of Vehicles. And I thank you all again for this opportunity to present as a proponent on Senate Bill 99. This is again being requested by the Division of Vehicles, and a similar bill was proposed last year, passed out of Senate 39-0 before the pandemic. As mentioned by the revisor, currently dealerships are required to carry a bond of $30,000. We're seeking to increase that amount to $50,000. And the main reason for that is that as the economy changes, we tend to see that there are dealerships that go out of business and leave customers hanging. That's the purpose of this bond, is to protect those customers who made a good faith purchase and then are unable to get title to that vehicle. They are required to go through a court proceeding and get a judgment against the dealership before they can attach the bond. We have seen multiple cases of dealerships that have gone out of business and left several customers hanging. The amounts of their judgments are greater than the $30,000 bond that exists, or sometimes we're seeing that the vehicles are higher priced because this law was originally made back in the 80s when vehicle prices were much lower. So we're therefore seeking the increase in the bond. I'd be happy to stand for questions.
We'll hold questions till after all the proponents have gone. Next up, we have Don McNeely, Kansas Automobile Dealers Association. Welcome back to the committee.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I am Don McNeely, and I serve as president of the Kansas Automobile Dealers Association. I appear this morning in support of this proposal on behalf of the industry. We testified accordingly last year. We do believe this is an appropriate amount considering the increase. Transaction prices of vehicles, new cars are approaching $40,000. The average used vehicle transaction is well over $20,000. This proposal was also vetted with the Kansas Dealer Review Board, and the industry is in support of this proposal, and I'd stand for any questions the committee may have.
Committee questions for either one of the proponents? Senator Hawk.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Don, good to see you.
Good to see you, Senator.
What's the average cost per bond increase for the dealers to go from 30 to 50?
I believe Hannah wasn't it $50, $100 to increase 50,000.
And
The average price now is $150 for the $30,000 bond, but it also depends upon the underwriting of the specific entity that the insurance company is issuing the bond to.
I assume that's per vehicle. I should know that.
This here, the bond is for specific instances, but for the license, a dealer needs to have one bond.
One bond.
Right.
So it's not an exorbitant increase.
No.
Wouldn't affect a dealer's ability to keep functioning. Good.
Like I said,
I assume that.
I think the average price now for the $30,000 bond is $150. And we're told by, who was the bonding company that you spoke with? Nationwide, they said the additional 50 would be an additional $100, so taking it to $250.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Powell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, Don.
Good morning, sir.
I'm curious, your testimony says the Dealers Association supports this. What about the little itty bitty guys that just, go to the sales, or maybe they're not your members, I don't know, but they sell used cars.
Dealers.
They sell used cars, so they're not selling the high-end dollar stuff.
Right.
Is there any kind of exception for where their bonding is lower based on the value? They're not? No.
Not in this proposal. The independent dealers are represented on the Kansas Dealer Review Board, and they've been aware of this proposed increase for a couple of years. The division has been battering back and forth with the Dealer Review Board, explaining the various claims that they've had on bonds over the last several years, and it is with the small independent dealers that do go out of business.
Okay. Well, I can't imagine it was a unanimous decision by the association, but maybe it was. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, well, with our group, it's just the cost of doing business. And I think the division will tell you that, at least in the 30 years I've been here, I don't believe that there's been a claim on a new car dealer bond. It's more or less the smaller entities that do go out of business and leave the consumer hanging.
Leanne, did you want to add something onto that, since I don't have my computer to see if you wanted to speak?
I would just agree with what Mr. McNeely testified to. It is typically the used car dealers that we see this issue with. And some of them can, turn over a lot of vehicles. And so what we find are that there are, on occasion, a dealership that goes out of business that leaves, like I testified, several customers hanging with insufficient paperwork to get titles. And then that's the purpose of this bond, is to allow them to attach that judgment or that bond, and to be able to get the vehicle sold, titled, whatever. So, yeah, it's the smaller dealerships that this would affect the most.
Maybe, Mr. Chairman, in fact, I had a call last week. This doesn't have to do with the vehicle, but it has to do with the trailer. And this specific consumer was in Indiana, bought a trailer from a Kansas trailer dealer and never got the title. And they were wanting to know what their next move would be. And I directed them to the Division of Motor Vehicles, see if a claim can be made on that bond, because the individual never received its title on that trailer.
Committee, further questions or comments? Senator Bowers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Not necessarily a question, and thank you, Don, too. And I serve on the Dealer Review Board, and we have talked about this. And as a dealer for over 30 years, both used and new, this is, I feel, very appropriate. It's a cost of doing business that we expect, and our insurance rates on other policies have gone up, so this one has lasted a long time at $150. So it's not unreasonable. $50,000 seems fair also in our industry too.
And also, I believe when I got here in 1991, the amount of the bond was $15,000. I think how we got to 30, if I'm not mistaken, and Chairman, you may remember, I believe when Senator Donovan chaired this committee, he's the one that proposed increase in the bond at that time. I think actually the proposal was considerably more than 30, and due to some of the concerns that Senator Pyle had, that's how we ended up at 30.
Senator Hawk.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I might have kind of asked this, but I'm not. This may be another variation. So what if you're a dealership and you go out of business and there are 4 customers that are left holding the bag, but you have one bond for $50,000? Does that bond cover all 4 of those purchases?
I think that's a question for the division, Senator, of how that a bond attaches per transaction. Leanne, would you like, excuse me, Mr. Chairman, could I ask it?
Leanne?
I can answer that. Yes, sir. Thank you. So as I mentioned, they have to have a court judgment, and the judgment typically indicates a dollar amount of that judgment. And so it just depends on the vehicle and that judgment amount, whether the bond's going to cover it all or not. And what we've found is that on some cases it does not, and on some it does. So it really is, it's individual, it's case by case.
Let me maybe rephrase that. So
Okay.
let's assume, for the sake of argument, let's assume those are 4 fairly new $50,000 Humvee type vehicles, and the dealership goes out of business and can't cover that, so the customer's left holding the bag. Does that one $50,000 bond, or would it get divided up between all 4 of those vehicles?
What we would do is take the claims and look at them individually, and a lot of times it is divided up and partial judgments are paid, or full judgment. A full judgment might be paid in one circumstance and a partial in another. It is determined by the director, and we present all that information to him, and the decision gets made.
But if the judgments are over $50,000, it's only, regardless of whether it's 1 or 4 or a dozen, it's only going to pay up to the $50,000.
Correct. Correct.
that makes me kind of wonder if in some circumstances, when a dealership might go out of business, I would seriously doubt there would just be one vehicle in question, but maybe that bonds for other things besides a dealer going out of business?
I believe the way the statute words it is that it's to the benefit of a retail customer upon being wronged. So they have to, we ask them when they present their court judgment to the division and ask for the bond, we ask them to identify in 82404 which of those violations of statute affected them. We try to tie that back together and make it line out with the violations that a dealer can be charged with.
And finally, I would assume this doesn't happen very often. Actually, that this bond is for more of a worst-case scenario, and it's not likely to occur very often because Mr. McNeely's members are wonderful businesses.
I can tell
you
you
don't need to
that,
respond to that part.
I think, if I could, Mr. Chairman, I think, Senator, is that, this is, like you said, this is a subject of last resort. They're going to go after the other assets. And as Ms. Phelps said, it's really for the smaller operations that don't have the assets. They may be renting a piece of property in order to conduct their business, as opposed to those businesses or dealerships that actually own the property and have considerable amount of assets that a aggrieved party could go after.
I'm just trying to get at, if it's trying to take care of the worst case scenarios, is it enough? Because I could see some worst case scenarios where it might not be if it was more than one customer.
And do we know how many people last year actually utilized the bond that went to bonding?
I could get that information for you. I don't have it in front of me right now, but we do keep that information and I could provide that to the committee. And I can maybe speak to Senator Hawk's concern that we have seen some claims that are well over 100,000. They are not the common situation, but they do occur. I would say that the reason that we landed on the 50,000 was because it would cover the majority of the claims that we would receive. Thank you.
Mr. McNeely.
And one other comment. Last year, I did an unofficial survey, and it appears that 50,000 is the average across the country. 50,000 is the amount in Missouri, Nebraska. So that seems to be a uniform, let's say uniform, but the average amount of a surety bond across the states.
Further questions? Thank you. Appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you.
Have any other proponents wishing to testify? Any opponents? Any neutrals? We'll close the hearing on Senate Bill 99. And for those listening online, we are going to look at working Senate Bill 67, so we'll probably be voting. Don't know if Senator Tyson is done with her meeting that she's listening to, but just let her know we'll probably be voting and we're getting ready to work. Adam, can you give us a briefing on Senate Bill 67?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senate Bill 67 would amend the definition of all-terrain vehicles and recreational off-highway vehicles. The current definition of all-terrain vehicles would be expanded. So the current 50 inches would be increased up to 55 inches, and how they're measured would now be defined as the outside of one tire rim to the outside of the other tire rim. And then additionally, recreational off-highway vehicle definition would be amended from the current limitation of 64 inches up to now 75 inches with the same measurement from tire rim to tire rim language provided in the bill. And also the dry weight would be increased for recreational highway vehicles from 2,000 to 3,500 pounds. And with that, I'd be happy to stand for any questions.
Any questions for Adam? Committee, what's your pleasure on this bill? Any discussion? But he's just kind of reviewing it right now. I would entertain a motion to move it out. We might hold the roll open for just a minute or two to allow those folks running from their offices to come up and vote. Senator Hawk.
I don't recall us amending the bill. Did we?
We're working it now. Nobody has proposed any amendments.
If we don't amend it, I just throw out, do we want it on consent calendar for us to think about before we make that motion?
It sure looks like to me it would be consent calendar material. We have one more member here coming out of his subcommittee. Committee, I'd entertain a motion. Senator Dietrich.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move that we report Senate Bill number 67 favorably out of this committee and put it on the consent agenda with no amendments.
Do we have a second? Seconded by Senator Hawk. Further discussion? Committee, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Those opposed? Looking pretty good. I may hold it open for just a minute or two to see if Senator Tyson wants to make it up. Did we know if she's on her way from her office? Senator Pyle?
I'm just curious, looking at some of the testimony in here, are these folks selling these, are they licensed as an auto dealer? Because I mean, I'm out in farm country, and I see these things being driven from 5 miles away from the city out to a farm pond, up and down the roads. I mean, they go, as we had testimony, they travel just like at the speeds that a car can, or a truck can go. And they're being used a lot in place of a pickup truck nowadays, because they're built like a pickup truck, a lot of them. And I'm just asking, are these dealers licensed? Are they bonded like we just had a bill before? Are we, I mean, where do we draw the line between and distinguishing it from?
I believe they're licensed as a motorcycle dealer. I don't believe that they would fall underneath the automotive bond. Don McNeely might be able to add on to that.
Are they licensed?
Don McNeely with the Kansas Auto Dealers, I don't believe they are. I mean, they're retailers. You know, there's numerous different sport utility vehicles sold. I mean, you know, you can go to some of the farm supply stores, and, you know, they're not like the Polaris Ranger or the John Deere Gator, but there's a wide variety of vehicles.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, I'm just, you know, I'm not against the bill, but I just, at some point, where do we stop just incrementally building these bigger, not define them as a truck? I mean, they have dump beds on these things, and I'm not opposed to that. I think that's great. But if you can buy one of these and get around all the registration and the title and, I mean, all of that, maybe they're titled, but if you can, I know I've had instances where people are reselling these and they don't have a title for them, so they're not paying any property taxes on them. And so I'm just saying, the farther we go into this, you know, we keep getting these bills over time. At some point, where do they meet the definition that they're going to qualify for all of that? And so just some things that I think that ought to be on our radar as we move this out to the consent calendar. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I know in our county, they do send out every year a list for your off-road vehicles and ask you to sign what you have and all your trailers and all that. Senator Hawk.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I know you have a great memory on the bills that have come out of this committee or staff. We did pass a bill last year, and I think it passed in the House and was signed by the governor, was it not, that allowed these ATVs type vehicles to drive on highways under certain restrictions and cross. Well, they could cross, but we also allowed them if they were going for, and originally it was for an agriculture purpose or hunting. I can't remember. It seemed like it was fairly wide open. I remember I was trying to get them to have some kind of signage if they were a slow-moving vehicle. And then I found out they're not that slow-moving. But anyway, if we're waiting, would it?
The county does have the ability to put restrictions on them, and the counties can enforce those restrictions. I agree with Senator Pyle that there are a lot of the county sheriffs that are not enforcing those restrictions. Senator Pittman, we're on a motion to put the bill on the off-road vehicles out favorable for passage, and because it's non-controversial, place it on the consent calendar. We were having some discussion over other laws that were surrounding these vehicles in the middle. Would you like to vote?
Yes, sir. I would like to vote and record it as a yes.
Thank you. I haven't heard from Karen, so I don't, is she online right now? Does she have her hand raised? Since I don't have that in front of me with my technology today, we'll close the roll and the motion carried. Let's move forward to sit down, put it out on the consent calendar. Committee, we are not meeting tomorrow. We will not meet tomorrow. There's no meeting scheduled for Monday. We have a full week next week. We're adjourned.